Imagine for a second that you're just, walking across a really thick wool carpet in your socks.
Oh, yeah, the classic static setup.
Exactly. And you don't feel any static charge building up, right? You don't feel heavy or anything. Everything seems completely normal.
Right, totally not.
But then the second you reach out and touch a metal doorknob, bam, you get this shock that makes you physically recoil.
It's the worst feeling.
It really is. And human conflict actually operates on that exact same hidden physics.
It really does, yeah.
So today, we are doing a deep dive into the fossil record of human anger. We're going to track how this totally invisible friction eventually just, burns down a relationship or a family or even an entire company.
And I think what's so remarkable about mapping out that progression is that, we don't even need a psychology textbook to do it.
Right.
The English language has actually already perfectly preserved the entire anatomy of an argument for us.
It's wild to think about.
It is. When you analyze the specific idioms we use to describe conflict, you start to realize they aren't just colorful phrases. They are highly precise biological and physical markers of escalation.
Yeah, and we're basing this on a masterclass that was originally designed for advanced English language learners, which maps this out so brilliantly.
It really is a great framework.
We are essentially charting a biological and psychological roadmap today. We're going to trace the exact trajectory of a feud, starting from subtle feline biology, moving to heavy forestry equipment breaking apart, all the way down to ancient medical theories about the literal toxicity of human blood.
It's like an evolutionary timeline of escalation because, long before anyone raises their voice or long before HR gets involved or a divorce lawyer is called, the conflict incubates.
Right. It sits there in the dark.
Exactly. It starts in a state of passive, almost imperceptible friction.
And we've all experienced this, right? You meet someone and their personality just instantly grates on you.
Oh, instant.
And the phrase we use to describe this incubation phase is that someone rubs you the wrong way.
Right.
And the tactile nature of that metaphor is just rooted so deeply in animal biology. Think about petting a domestic cat.
A great example.
Right. When you stroke the animal's fur from the head down to the tail, you are moving with the natural grain.
The fur lays flat.
Exactly. The fur lays flat, the animal purrs, and the nervous system of that cat is completely regulated and calm.
But if you reverse that motion, right, if you aggressively push your hand against the grain from the tail up toward the head, you fundamentally alter the physical state of the animal.
You really do. It hates it.
Piloerection occurs. That's the scientific term. The hair follicles literally stand up.
The cat stops purring immediately. Its muscles tense up. And honestly, if you keep doing it, you're going to get bitten.
Oh, absolutely. And the crazy part is you haven't actually injured the cat.
Right. No physical harm was done.
But you violated its natural alignment, which is exactly what happens in human interactions, just on a neurological level.
Wow. Yeah.
When we say someone rubs us the wrong way, we are talking about this concept known as neuroception.
Neuroception. Okay, break that down for us.
So your autonomic nervous system is basically constantly, continuously scanning your environment for threats.
Like a radar.
Exactly like a radar. And it happens completely beneath your conscious awareness. So your prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational part of your brain, might look at a new colleague and say, well, they are doing their job perfectly well. They're polite.
But your amygdala is just sounding a massive alarm.
Precisely. Your amygdala is processing all these tiny micro-expressions. It's noticing maybe a slight asymmetry in their smile.
Or like a weird tone in their voice.
Right. A specific cadence in their voice or just a rigidity in their posture. So the rational brain sees a competent coworker. But the nervous system sees a predator.
That is so intense.
The friction is entirely real, even if you can't articulate a single logical reason for why you dislike them.
I think we tend to feel incredibly guilty about this, though.
Oh, for sure.
Like if someone hasn't explicitly done something wrong to us, but they just give us a bad vibe, we tell ourselves to get over it. We just think, I'm just being judgmental.
Well, there is a really crucial distinction to make there, because sometimes you actually are just being judgmental.
Fair point.
Implicit biases absolutely exist where we harbor, completely unfounded prejudices based on someone's background or their appearance.
Right, which is obviously a real and serious issue.
Exactly. But what we are talking about here, the specific idiom of being rubbed the wrong way, is usually about a clash of behavioral rhythms.
Behavioral rhythms, I like that phrase.
It's this incongruence in pacing or like a subtle violation of your personal boundaries that doesn't quite cross the line into an overt offense.
Like someone who stands just I don't know, half an inch too close to you when they speak.
Yes, exactly that.
It's not harassment, right?
Yeah.
But it's physically jarring. Or the classic example, someone who is perfectly polite, but they have this perpetually arrogant, kind of knowing smirk when you talk to them.
And the frustrating part is you can't take that to HR.
No, not at all.
You can't file a formal grievance that says, excuse me, my coworker's face is irritating.
Right. You'd sound insane. So what do? You swallow it. You just force yourself to ignore the static charge building up on the carpet.
But you can't ignore it forever.
No, you can't. And this is where the anatomy of the argument shifts from passive incubation into active resistance. Because in most corporate or family environments, you can't just avoid the person who rubs you the wrong way.
You're stuck with them.
You are literally forced to collaborate with them. And when that happens, the silent friction needs a grounding point.
It forces a structural transition. The ambient irritation crystallizes into this recurring physical collision. We move from the subtle biology of a house cat to the brute force of mountain goats.
Oh, man.
The individuals begin to, as we say, butt heads.
Right. So picture two massive male rams on the side of a mountain. They don't do subtle micro-expressions, do they?
Not at all.
When they need to establish dominance in their hierarchy, they back up, they lower their skulls, they charge at full speed, and they just violently smash their horns together.
And the concussive force of that is just staggering.
It's unbelievable.
It's a really fascinating biological mechanism, actually. A ram's horns are made of keratin.
Which is the same material as human fingernails, right?
Exactly. But they are built over this solid core of bone and then surrounded by incredibly complex shock-absorbing tissues.
Wow.
So they are biologically engineered to withstand massive localized impact without shattering the skull.
Which perfectly mirrors what happens in a boardroom. When two people are butting heads, they aren't trying to destroy the company.
No, they're not.
They are engaged in a localized, repetitive struggle for dominance. It's a pure test of structural integrity.
Think about like a creative director and a chief financial officer.
Of the classic rivalry.
Right. The creative director has this massive, expensive vision for a marketing campaign, and the CFO is tasked with protecting the profit margins. They are inherently at odds.
Built-in friction.
Built in. So they go into a meeting and they basically smash their metaphorical horns together. Neither is willing to compromise an inch.
The creative director charges in like, we need this to go viral, and the CFO charges right back, we don't have the budget, smash.
Smash. But notice the parameters of this conflict. Rams butting heads are engaged in ritualistic combat.
Ritualistic.
It is highly aggressive, it's loud, but it is ultimately a contained test of endurance.
That makes sense.
The goal isn't to kill the other ram, The goal is to see who gives up first. Meanwhile, the rest of the flock just continues grazing.
Just watching them bang their heads.
Exactly. And in an office setting, these two managers might butt heads every single Tuesday at 10 a.m., but the business continues to function around them.
It's sustainable, I guess, up to a point. But shock absorption has its limits.
It really does.
You can only smash your horns together so many times before someone develops a concussion, metaphorically speaking. The ritualistic combat eventually just stops yielding results.
Because nothing is actually getting resolved.
Right. Someone realizes that constantly crashing into the other person isn't actually advancing their agenda. The tension demands a more targeted, definitive resolution.
Which brings us to the second major phase of our anatomy. The confrontation.
The confrontation.
The contained struggle finally breaks out of its pen. One party decides to initiate a direct, high-stakes dispute.
And the language shifts again here, moving from the mountain down to, the alleyway. When you're ready to stop the broad dominance games and officially corner someone, you tell them you have a bone to pick.
Such a vivid phrase.
It is. Imagine two incredibly hungry, highly stressed dogs. There is one single meager piece of meat left on a bone lying in the dirt right between them.
The tension is palpable.
They are sizing each other up, fully aware that a fight is absolutely imminent over who gets to strip that final piece of meat.
And this represents a profound narrowing of focus in the conflict. Look at the trajectory we've traveled so far.
Yeah, let's recap that.
We started with a general atmospheric discomfort, the cat's fur. Then we moved to a recurring battle over general territory, the rams. And now we have distilled all of that ambient frustration down to a singular, hyper-specific grievance.
It's no longer about the creative budget in general. It's about the fact that you left my name off the presentation slide yesterday.
Right. It gets incredibly specific. When you approach a colleague and say, I have a bone to pick with you, you are officially serving them a verbal summons.
A verbal summons, wow.
You are demanding to argue right now over this exact piece of territory. You are forcing the conflict into the open.
I have to challenge this approach, though. Like, if we look at the psychology you just described, actually, throwing a literal bone on the ground between two hungry animals and demanding they fight for it seems like an incredibly reckless communication strategy.
It definitely sounds intense when you put it that way.
Because you are cornering the other person. You are framing the interaction as a zero-sum game before they even have a chance to speak. Doesn't this specific phrasing, this mentality, guarantee a volatile reaction? You're basically bypassing any chance of diplomacy.
I see why you interpret it as a guarantee of volatility for sure, but we have to consider the alternative here.
Okay, what's the alternative?
Well, when two people are caught in that passive-aggressive cycle of butting heads or silently rubbing each other the wrong way, the ambient toxicity can poison a team for years.
That's true. It just lingers.
It never ends. So sometimes isolating the grievance, putting the bone on the table, so to speak, is literally the only way to force a resolution. You have to risk the volatility to break the stalemate.
So you're saying a localized explosion is better than a slow radioactive leak?
In many organizational contexts, yes, absolutely. However, your instinct about cornering someone is entirely accurate regarding their neurological response.
Because they feel trapped.
Exactly. When you isolate the grievance so aggressively, you absolutely risk triggering their fight or flight mechanism. If you throw the bone down and they feel cornered, they are not going to evaluate the situation rationally.
The prefrontal cortex just shuts down entirely.
Entirely. And that loss of emotional regulation leads us to one of the most dangerous idioms in this entire landscape.
I know which one this is.
When a person is cornered, they are highly likely to fly off the handle.
This is such a viscerally terrifying metaphor to me. We leave the animal kingdom completely and move into the physics of heavy machinery.
Yes, the lumberjack.
Imagine a lumberjack deep in the woods swinging this massive, heavy iron axe to chop down a thick tree. That tool relies on a crucial structural bond, right? The heavy iron head must be securely fastened to the wooden handle.
It's all about the transfer of kinetic energy.
Exactly. When the tool is intact, the lumberjack swings, the momentum builds, and the energy is driven precisely into the tree. It is productive, controlled application of force.
But if that iron head is loose,
everything changes. The lumberjack swings with all that massive momentum. But instead of hitting the tree, the iron blade suddenly detaches.
just pops right off.
It flies completely off the wooden handle, soaring uncontrollably through the air at high speed, heavily rotating, ready to obliterate whatever it happens to strike.
And the psychology mapped onto this physics is just incredible, because this idiom doesn't just mean someone is getting a little bit angry.
No, it's way past a little bit.
Flying off the handle represents a total and complete severance between the rational brain and the emotional response.
The wooden handle is the logic.
Yeah.
The heavy iron blade is the pure amygdala, and they are no longer attached.
Exactly. When someone flies off the handle, the anger they display is wildly disproportionate to the trigger.
Can you give us an example of that?
Sure. Let's say you approach a coworker. You don't even have a bone to pick, right? You just ask a simple, routine question about when a report will be finished.
Super basic stuff.
But because they are deeply stressed, or maybe because they've been incubating silent resentment toward you for months, they don't just answer the question.
They explode.
They completely explode. They start screaming at you in the middle of the open plan office, bringing up mistakes you made 3 years ago, insulting your intelligence, just completely melting down.
You eventually tap the tree with the axe, and the entire tool self-destructed in your hands.
And the collateral damage of a flying axe head is immense.
It has to be.
Because once that heavy iron blade is airborne, it has no targeting system. It doesn't care what it hits.
Right.
It damages the person who asked the question. It deeply unsettles the innocent bystanders sitting at the surrounding desks who have to witness this crazy screaming match.
Everyone just staring at their monitors.
Exactly. And most importantly, it causes catastrophic damage to the professional reputation of the person who lost control.
Because nobody trusts a broken axe. Even if you manage to reattach the head later, everyone in the office remembers the day it flew through the air. They will always hesitate before working with you again.
The contained, ritualistic boundary of butting heads is entirely gone at this point. We have transitioned from structural tension into pure chaos.
Which brings us to the tipping point. The axe head is spinning through the air. Someone has just completely lost their mind in the middle of the office. We are in a highly volatile crisis.
A total crisis.
And in this exact split-second moment, the reaction of the other person, the victim of the screaming match, dictates whether this situation fizzles out into an embarrassing apology later or whether it turns into an uncontrolled catastrophe.
This is the crisis response phase. It is the crucible of emotional intelligence.
And to illustrate this, we move from physics into combustion.
Fire.
Yes, fire. If a fire breaks out in your home, the immediate goal is mitigation. You need to smother the heat, remove the oxygen, or introduce water.
Right, calm it down.
But if, in a moment of panic or foolishness, you grab a bucket of gasoline pure combustible fuel and you pour it onto those flames, you don't just have a fire anymore. You have an uncontrolled inferno. You add fuel to the fire.
And when we look at this through the lens of human behavior, adding fuel to the fire is the exact moment when our ego overrides our basic survival instinct.
That's a huge statement. Walk me through the mechanics of that.
Okay, let's go back to the coworker screaming at you about the report.
Right, the open plan office meltdown.
The rational, survival-based response to a dysregulated person is de-escalation. It's the introduction of metaphorical water.
How do you do that?
You lower your voice, you create physical space, you acknowledge their distress without validating their insult. You essentially wait for their nervous system to settle.
But that requires you to swallow your pride while someone is literally humiliating you in public.
Precisely. And the human ego despises being attacked.
It really does.
So instead of de-escalating, your ego steps in and demands that you defend yourself. You decide to argue back.
Which never works.
Never. You try to use logic and debate against a person whose prefrontal cortex is currently offline. You're trying to win a chess match against someone who is currently flipping the board over.
It's an impossible scenario. And there's one specific phrase, probably the most universally despised phrase in the English language, that people use in this moment.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
They look at the screaming person, they hold up their hands, and they say, "You need to calm down."
It is the ultimate accelerant. It is mathematically guaranteed to multiply the psychological damage.
It really is.
Yeah.
I want to compare this to a grease fire in a kitchen.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
If a pan of oil catches fire on your stove, your absolute primal human instinct is to think, fire is bad, water puts out fire, I will throw water on this.
Which is the worst thing you could do.
So you throw a glass of water onto the burning oil. But because of the specific chemical interaction between water and superheated lipids, the water doesn't extinguish the flame.
Right.
It instantly vaporizes, it expands 1,000 times in volume, and it atomizes the burning oil, causing the entire room to explode in a massive fireball.
Your instinctive attempt to fix the problem is the exact mechanical trigger that burns your house down.
Exactly. And telling someone to calm down is the psychological equivalent of throwing water on a grease fire.
Because it is profoundly invalidating. When you tell a furious person to calm down, you are not actually offering them a pathway to regulation.
No, you're not.
You are communicating an incredibly condescending message. You are telling them that their emotional state is incorrect, that their reaction is unjustified, and that their feelings are merely an inconvenience to you.
You're stripping away their agency while they're already in a state of extreme vulnerability.
Yes, you are telling a drowning person that they are splashing too loudly.
Wow. That's exactly what it is.
It instantly shifts their anger from whatever the original trigger was directly onto you as a person. The fire expands.
So we have axes flying, grease fires exploding. It's a very loud, kinetic view of conflict. But let me pivot us slightly, because not all devastating conflicts operate on this kind of explosive, sudden velocity.
That's very true.
What happens when the escalation isn't a screaming match? What happens when the fire is a slow, quiet burn over a period of years?
This is a vital distinction to make, because sometimes the most catastrophic failures aren't about sudden impact at all.
What are they about then?
They are about carrying capacity. They are about the silent, invisible accumulation of microscopic stress.
And to capture this, we have to travel back to an ancient Arab proverb, the concept of the straw that broke the camel's back.
We shift from kinetic physics to structural endurance.
I want you to really visualize the poetry and the cruelty of this metaphor. Imagine a massive, powerful beast of burden, a camel, bred for extreme desert conditions, capable of carrying immense weight.
A really strong animal.
The merchant who owns the camel begins loading it for a journey. They strap heavy bag after heavy bag onto the animal's sides. The camel is incredibly strong, but it is a biological organism.
Right, it has limits.
Its skeletal structure, its muscles, its spine, they have a finite mathematical breaking point.
There is an absolute physical limit to the tension those bones can withstand before the cellular structure fails.
Right, so the merchant keeps loading bags until the camel reaches that exact, precise threshold. The animal is carrying the absolute maximum weight it can survive. It cannot handle 1 single ounce more.
It's at peak capacity.
And then the merchant takes a piece of dry straw, one single microscopic, essentially weightless piece of dried grass,
Fractional unit of mass.
a whisper of weight. And they drop that tiny piece of straw onto the top of the massive pile of heavy bags.
And that's it.
And that microscopic addition, that fraction of an ounce, tips the mathematical scale. The mighty camel's spine violently snaps in half, and the massive beast completely collapses into the sand.
If we translate this into human neurology and organizational behavior, this metaphor is a perfect description of a phenomenon called allostatic load.
Let's unpack that. What is allostatic load?
So allostasis is the process by which the body responds to stressors in order to regain homeostasis.
Regain balance, basically.
Exactly. When you experience stress, your body releases cortisol, your heart rate elevates, you deal with the problem, and then you return to a baseline.
Normal stress response.
But allostatic load refers to the cumulative wear and tear on your biological systems when you are subjected to chronic, repeated stress.
When the heavy bags are never taken off the camel.
Exactly. Your cortisol levels never drop back to baseline. Your nervous system remains perpetually inflamed.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. In a professional relationship, those bags are the history of minor unresolved offenses. It's the colleague who chronically talks over you in meetings.
Or the subtle passive-aggressive emails.
Yes, or the manager who takes credit for your ideas just slightly, over and over again.
You are carrying all of this historical weight day after day, month after month.
Let's use a highly specific example to make this real.
Let's do it.
Imagine an employee who has been late to work 5 times in a single month.
Okay, a lot of lateness.
And they always have an excuse. Traffic, a flat tire, an alarm clock issue. The manager just absorbs this. They have to rearrange coverage. They have to deal with frustrated clients. The manager's allostatic load is increasing.
The camel's being loaded with heavy bags.
Exactly. The manager's spine is groaning, but they remain professional. They haven't flown off the handle.
Right. And then on a Tuesday afternoon, that same employee accidentally spills a cup of coffee on the break room floor and doesn't wipe it up properly.
Straw.
The straw. The manager walks in, steps in the sticky coffee, looks at the employee, and instantly fires them on the spot.
Now, if you isolate the trigger event spilling coffee, it's entirely trivial.
It's a minor accident.
In a vacuum, a spilled coffee requires a paper towel and a mop. It absolutely does not warrant a termination.
But human beings do not experience events in a vacuum.
Ever.
We experience every event through the lens of historical context. Because of the massive accumulated weight of the 5 late arrivals, the chronic unreliability, the disrespect for the manager's time, the coffee spill isn't just a spill.
No, it's not.
It is the final breach of the manager's carrying capacity.
And this is why conflict often feels so profoundly confusing and honestly unfair to the person who dropped the straw.
Oh, totally.
That employee is going to go home and tell their family, my boss is a psychopath. I got fired over a spilled cup of coffee. That's insane.
Because they're only looking at the straw. They're completely ignoring the hundreds of pounds of behavioral baggage they strapped to the manager's back over the preceding month.
The collapse is incredibly sudden, but the cause was entirely chronic.
Which perfectly transitions us into the final and, frankly, the darkest chapter of our roadmap.
It does get pretty dark here.
Because whether the relationship collapsed because of a flying app's head, a grease fire, or a snapped spine, the polite facade is now gone. The structural integrity of the relationship is permanently destroyed.
It's over.
We are no longer butting heads over a budget spreadsheet. We aren't picking a bone over a schedule. The conflict has metastasized. It has moved from a localized, contained dispute into a state of total, unmitigated war.
The gloves are completely off.
And to capture this, we are pulled right back into the predatory animal kingdom. When human beings abandon all pretense of civility, they are said to be at each other's throats.
Notice the profound shift in the anatomy of the attack here.
It is entirely lethal. Think about 2 wolves fighting for survival in the wild.
vicious.
When a confrontation escalates from a territorial display into a fight to the death, those animals don't waste their energy biting at the thick fur on the shoulders or snapping at the paw.
No, they don't.
They bypass all the armor. They go directly, intentionally, and viciously for the throat, the jugular vein, the single most vulnerable, exposed, and lethal spot on the entire biological organism.
Compare the intent here to our earlier mountain goat metaphor.
The rams butting heads.
Right. When the rams were butting heads, they were intentionally ramming the thickest, most protected, most highly reinforced parts of their bodies together.
Because it was a contest of strength.
Exactly. Designed to establish dominance without causing fatal injury. But when a wolf goes for the throat, the goal is no longer dominance.
The goal is termination.
Exactly. When human beings are at each other's throats, they have abandoned any desire to win the argument using logic or merit. They are intentionally using their intimate knowledge of the other person to inflict maximum psychological and emotional damage.
I think the most devastating arena for this is a bitter divorce, or the dissolution of a long-term business partnership.
Weaponized intimacy.
Yes, weaponized intimacy. In a bitter divorce, those two people know everything about each other.
Every single detail.
They know the deepest insecurities, the childhood traumas, the greatest fears, the precise things that cause the other person to feel worthless.
They know exactly where the metaphorical throat is located.
And instead of protecting that vulnerability as they did when they were in love, they strike it with absolute precision.
They say the exact words guaranteed to cause catastrophic emotional bleeding. They aren't trying to resolve who gets the house. They're trying to destroy the other person's sense of self.
Which raises a really dark philosophical question. I want you listening to think about this in the context of your own life.
It's an important question.
When a conflict reaches this stage of lethality, is there any coming back? I mean, once you bypass the polite arguments over the budget or the dishes, and you actively, deliberately demonstrate that you know how to tear out the other person's throat, haven't you fundamentally altered the DNA of that relationship forever?
You really have.
Can you ever sit across a boardroom table or a dinner table and trust the wolf who just showed you their teeth?
From a psychological and behavioral standpoint, the answer is almost universally no.
It's just too far.
You cannot unring that bell. The trust is not just broken, it is incinerated. And our final idiom confirms this permanent alteration. It tells us that even if the act of fighting stops, the conflict leaves a toxic residue.
And the phrase is bad blood.
Bad blood. And the etymology of this specific phrase is absolutely fascinating because it bridges human emotional conflict directly with ancient medical history.
This takes us all the way back to the theories of Hippocrates and Galen, right? The foundations of ancient medicine.
Exactly. It takes us back to the era of humoral medicine. For centuries, the greatest medical minds in the world believed that the human body and human health was governed by 4 distinct fluids, or humors.
Blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm.
It sounds bizarre to a modern ear, but this was the absolute cutting-edge science of their time.
It was undisputed medical fact for hundreds of years. And the core tenet of humoral medicine was that your physical health and your emotional, psychological state were deeply, literally interconnected.
They didn't see a separation between the mind and the body.
So they didn't view anger as just a passing feeling.
Not at all. They believed that if you harbored chronic anger, deep bitterness, or sustained vicious hatred toward another person, like the hatred generated when you were at each other's throats, that negative emotional state would literally corrupt the fluids in your veins.
Wow.
Your actual physical blood would become toxic. It would turn thick, dark, and poisoned. It would literally become bad blood.
So your hatred literally poisons your own bloodstream. The feud kills you from the inside out.
Yes. Now, obviously, we have abandoned humoral medicine for modern cellular biology and germ theory.
Right, thankfully.
But what's incredible is how accurately this ancient medical belief maps onto modern psychosomatic medicine and epigenetics.
Because anger actually does change our biological markers.
Precisely. We now know that chronic anger and unresolved trauma keep your body in a state of sympathetic nervous system arousal.
It's just always on.
It elevates systemic inflammation. It increases your risk for cardiovascular disease. It alters your immune response.
That's terrifying.
The ancient Greeks didn't have microscopes to see cortisol or inflammatory cytokines, but they accurately observed the physical decay caused by prolonged hatred. They just called it bad blood.
And even beyond the literal biology, the metaphor survives because it perfectly describes the aftermath of total war in a social setting.
Because blood circulates.
Exactly. It flows through a system.
Yeah, and so does hatred. Think about two tech founders who start a company in their garage, build it into a billion-dollar empire, and then have a massive throat-tearing falling out over equity.
Oh, we've seen that all the time.
They sue each other, they destroy each other's reputations in the press, and eventually one is forced out.
Even long after the lawyers pack up their briefcases and the court documents are sealed and the founders haven't spoken a single word to each other in a decade,
Yeah.
the conflict is still there.
It leaves a permanent stain on the organization. That is the essence of bad blood.
It's structural.
It becomes deeply entrenched, historical hatred. It lingers as a toxic residue within the organizational bloodstream. You see new employees who are hired 5 years after the lawsuit, and they are subtly taught to hate the former founder, even though they never met them.
The toxicity is inherited.
It happens in families all the time,
Yeah,
too.
Absolutely. Two brothers have a vicious falling out over an inheritance. Decades later, their grandchildren, who have never even met each other, know that they are supposed to hate that side of the family.
The bad blood has circulated into the next generation.
It is an anger that refuses to die. It is the ultimate tragic destination of unmanaged conflict.
It really is.
So if we pull all the way back and look at this map we just navigated together, we have literally charted the entire dramatic life cycle of a feud.
From start to finish.
And we did it entirely guided by the incredibly cinematic, visceral vocabulary that human beings have developed to describe their pain.
It's a remarkable, unbroken progression of escalation.
We started with the quiet, tactile, invisible irritation of rubbing a cat's fur the wrong way. That silent, static electricity building up on the carpet.
We watched that ambient friction solidify into the loud, stubborn, localized dominance games of mountain goats butting heads.
We saw the tension narrow into a hyper-specific grievance, with two hungry dogs picking a single bone in the dirt.
We watched the catastrophic, terrifying loss of emotional control as the lumberjack's heavy iron axe flew completely off the handle, destroying everything in its path.
We witnessed the disastrous physics of ego overriding survival, adding gasoline fuel to a burning grease fire.
And we examined the tragic, silent mathematics of allostating load, where a single piece of straw snaps the overloaded camel's spine.
And finally, we descended into the absolute brutality of total war, with wolves bypassing armor to go for the lethal vulnerability of the throat, ending with the historical permanent toxicity of bad blood circulating through the veins of a destroyed relationship.
When you lay it all out like that, it really highlights a profound contradiction in how we view ourselves.
How so?
We like to think of ourselves as highly evolved, highly rational creatures. We operate in clean, modern environments with HR departments and conflict resolution seminars, but our language completely betrays our true, primitive nature.
Which brings us to the final thought we want to leave you with today. As you go back to your day, whether you're commuting or sitting at your desk or dealing with a frustrating family member, I want you to notice something that isn't explicitly spelled out in the textbooks, but is screaming out from beneath the surface of every single idiom we just explored.
It's right there in plain sight.
Notice how almost all of these phrases rely on profound, visceral, biological vulnerability.
It is the inescapable common thread.
We are talking about animals fighting to the death in the dirt, heavy iron machinery breaking apart and flying through the air at high speeds,
Spinal columns physically snapping in half under unbearable weight.
blood itself turning toxic and poisonous. Even though your modern arguments usually happen in incredibly sterile environments, sitting in ergonomic chairs in air-conditioned offices, arguing over passive-aggressive Slack messages, our language reveals a hidden evolutionary truth.
Our brains still process social conflict as a literal, physical threat to our biological survival.
Exactly. The human nervous system has not evolved fast enough to catch up with the corporate world.
Not even close.
Your amygdala does not distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger stalking you in the brush and a condescending email from the finance department CCing your boss. The physiological threat response is exactly the same.
It is an evolutionary mismatch.
So the next time you're sitting in a meeting and you feel someone with an arrogant smile start to rub you the wrong way and you feel your heart rate start to rise, I want you to pause.
Take a second.
Take a breath and ask yourself a question. Are you actually physically in danger right now? Or is that adrenaline spike just an ancient echoing instinct from the animal kingdom trying to manifest itself in your modern life?
A really powerful question.
Because once you recognize the ancient machinery driving your anger, you finally have the power to stop the axe head from flying off the handle. I want you to picture the last time you were truly intensely angry.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. And I don't mean just, mildly irritated because someone cut you off in traffic or something.
I mean the real stuff.
Exactly. I'm talking about the kind of furious where your heart is just hammering against your ribs.
Yeah, your skin feels flushed.
Your skin is hot. Your breathing gets shallow. Your jaw clenches. You are entirely, completely consumed by the conflict. It's this universal human experience.
It really is.
And in that exact moment, the anger actually gives you this incredible surging rush of adrenaline. You feel powerful.
Oh, totally. You feel completely justified in whatever you're about to say or do.
Right. But here is the universal, inescapable truth about that state of being. It is physiologically and psychologically exhausting.
It's so draining. I mean, the human body is simply not designed to sustain that level of elevated cortisol and adrenaline indefinitely.
You just can't stay at each other's throats forever.
You can't. Eventually, that massive spike just has to fade. The fire burns out, and when the smoke finally clears, the biological high kind of dissipates, right?
Leaving you standing there in the cold reality of the aftermath.
Exactly. You look around at the absolute wreckage, the fractured trust, the words you can't take back.
The immense damage you've just inflicted on a relationship you actually care about.
Wow, that crash is brutal.
It is brutal. And I think that brings us to one of the most frustrating realities of being human, which is the core of our deep dive today.
Right, which is that destroying a relationship or just, breaking trust is incredibly fast.
It is terrifyingly easy.
It really is. It takes, a handful of seconds and a few sharp words?
Just a few seconds.
Yeah.
But fixing it, reversing that damage, and getting back to a place of mutual respect.
That is the hard part.
It requires an immense amount of time, a deep well of humility, and this tremendous degree of emotional intelligence. And well, let's be honest, we are notoriously bad at the repair phase.
We are so bad at it, which is actually why the language we use to describe conflict resolution is so fascinating to me.
Right. The sources we're looking at today dive deep into this. The vocabulary we rely on to navigate forgiveness doesn't just come out of nowhere.
No, it's deeply rooted in our collective history. If we look closely at the idioms and phrases we use to describe peacemaking, they actually form a blueprint.
A complete chronological architecture for how to heal the human soul and repair a broken bond.
And we're going to chart that exact journey today.
We are. We're going to trace the steps of reconciliation from the painful first moments of admitting fault through the spatial logic of medieval compromises.
All the way down to the physical, unstoppable flow of water.
It's basically the ultimate toolkit for diplomacy. If you want to know how to articulate a truly mature apology, or if you just want to understand the mechanics of successfully negotiating a truce in your own life, you need this.
But we have to start at the absolute hardest part of the process.
The very beginning.
Right. Before any resolution can possibly happen, before you can even think about moving forward, you have to admit you were wrong.
Oof.
Yeah. You have to recognize your anger was unjustified, and you have to completely surrender your ego.
And let's be real about what that feels like. It is an agonizing, nauseating experience.
It is the worst. Human beings will do almost anything to avoid admitting they're at fault.
Anything. And in English, the phrase we use for this agonizing first step is having to eat humble pie.
Right.
Now, on the surface, that sounds like a weirdly quaint, almost, charming baking metaphor.
Like a nice dessert?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at where it actually comes from in our sources, it is incredibly visceral and deeply unpleasant.
Yeah, the historical origins of this phrase take us straight into the stark, rigid class divides of medieval England.
So paint that picture for us.
Okay, so to understand the gravity of this idiom, you have to picture a massive royal hunt centuries ago.
Like lords and kings.
Exactly. And this was not a casual afternoon outing. A royal hunt was a grand, highly stratified socio-political event.
Aye.
You had the king, the wealthy aristocrats, the lords, and the knights leading the charge on horseback. And when they successfully hunted a deer, the spoils were divided strictly by social class.
Dictated by the absolute hierarchy of the time.
Precisely. So the premium, highly desirable cuts of the meat, the venison, the tenderloins, the haunches, those went directly to the top of the social ladder.
So the king and the lords get the filet mignon of the forest.
Basically, yeah. They get the glory and the feast.
Meanwhile, you have the servants, the people who actually did all the grueling physical labor of the hunt.
The beaters who flushed the game, the handlers managing the hounds.
Right, the peasants carrying the equipment. They obviously weren't getting prime cuts of venison.
No, they were given the leftovers. And by leftovers, we are talking about the cheap, decidedly unglamorous internal organs of the deer.
Oh, gross.
Yeah, we're talking about the heart, the liver, the lungs, the intestines, the tripes.
Just the absolute bottom of the barrel scrap.
Exactly. And in Old English, these entrails were known collectively as the umbles.
Spelled with a U, right?
Right, U-M-B-L-E-S. And to make these tough, strong-tasting, highly perishable organs somewhat palatable for human consumption, the kitchen servants would chop them up.
Just mix it all together.
Yeah, mix them with whatever suet and cheap spices they had and bake them into a heavy meat pastry.
And this dish was called, quite literally, an umble pie.
An umble pie. So the lords are eating roasted venison and the servants are choking down a pie made of deer intestines.
Wow. And then over the centuries, human beings did what we always do with language. We mashed words together.
Right.
Because the people forced to eat the umble pie were of a strictly lower, humble social status. This brilliant, accidental linguistic pun emerged.
The umble pie evolved into humble pie.
It's such a remarkable linguistic evolution. And it perfectly captures the deep psychological reality of what it actually means to admit you're wrong.
It really does. Because today, to eat humble pie isn't about literally consuming deer organs.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, but it is about suffering the profound psychological humiliation of admitting you were completely incorrect.
You're apologizing, and crucially, you're accepting a lower status in the context of that specific argument.
Right. You are taking the societal scraps.
Think about the neurobiology of why that hurts so much. Our ego is this incredibly protective mechanism, you know?
Yeah. It acts as an armor for our self-worth and our identity.
Right. And when you're angry and arguing, that armor is fully deployed. So to apologize, you have to voluntarily lower that shield.
You have to willingly make yourself small.
Like, imagine a highly confident CEO of a major tech corporation. He predicts, with total arrogance and bravado, that their new flagship product is going to be a massive, world-changing hit.
Oh, I can picture this guy.
Right. He ignores his engineers, he overrides his marketing team, and he basically stakes his entire professional reputation on this launch.
And then the product utterly fails. It is a catastrophic flop.
Just tanks.
The market rejects it, the reviews are terrible, and the company loses millions.
That CEO eventually has to walk into a boardroom, stand in front of the very directors and employees he previously talked down to, and he has to eat humble pie.
He has to look them in the eye, abandon his ego, and say, I was entirely wrong and you were completely right.
The transition from the physical to the psychological here is so intense. I mean, eating leftover internal organs evokes a very real gag reflex level of physical disgust.
That is literally hard to swallow.
Yes. And that is exactly what we feel when we are forced to surrender our ego. There's a visceral, almost nauseating psychological disgust when you have to walk up to someone, look them in the eye and say, I messed up. My anger was unjustified. I am the one at fault.
You are consuming your own pride. It is a deeply uncomfortable, ego-shattering sensation.
But it is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite for peace.
Exactly. If you cannot stomach the pie, the conflict will never truly end.
But let's say you do it, the ego is surrendered.
The pie has been eaten no matter how much it tasted like medieval deer liver.
Right. You've internally realized your fault. But, you can't just sit there in silence in your own house afterward.
No, internal realization doesn't fix the external damage.
You actually have to initiate the conversation with the person you were fighting with. You have to bridge the silence.
Which requires moving from the kitchen out into the world.
Right, which brings us to an ancient botanical metaphor.
Yeah.
You have to hold out an olive branch.
This is one of the most enduring, globally recognized metaphors in human history.
It really is everywhere.
To understand the gravity of this specific plant, we actually have to look at the ecology and history of the ancient Mediterranean.
Okay, so this goes way back.
Way back. This metaphor bridges Greek mythology, Roman diplomacy, and biblical history. In all of these ancient cultures, the olive tree was revered as a sacred symbol of profound wealth, sustenance, and stability.
When I was looking into the mechanics of this from our sources, the biological reality of the olive tree completely reframed the metaphor for me.
How so?
Well, it is all about the agricultural timeline.
Ah, exactly. Think about how societies function, and more importantly, how they survive during periods of warfare.
Right.
If you are an ancient farmer and a marauding enemy army marches through your valley and torches your fields, it's devastating.
Obviously.
But if they burn your wheat field or your patch of carrots or your barley, you can survive. You wait for the next season, you plant new seeds, and within a few months, you have a harvest again.
Because annual crops are resilient to short-term conflict.
Precisely. But an olive tree is a completely different story.
Right, because olive trees do not grow in a single season. They require immense patience.
An olive tree can take anywhere from 5 to 12 years just to begin bearing a usable harvest of fruit.
Wow.
And often decades to reach peak production.
So if that same invading army decides to chop down your ancestral olive grove, you aren't just ruined for a season.
No.
You are economically and nutritionally ruined for a generation. You cannot quickly replace an olive orchard.
Which means that an olive tree can only be successfully cultivated in a society that is completely, unconditionally at peace.
It requires long-term, guaranteed stability.
Yes, the soil must be completely free from the sudden, catastrophic destruction of war for years on end.
Therefore, the mere existence of a mature, fruit-bearing olive tree in the ancient world was physical, undeniable proof that a region had known sustained peace.
That context adds immense emotional weight to the gesture.
It really does. Presenting an olive branch to your enemy isn't just handing them a nice leafy twig.
No, it is the ultimate universal gesture of goodwill. Idiomatically, it means making the first positive, peaceful gesture to show you are ready to talk.
Imagine you have an estranged person in your life right now, a sibling, a parent, or a best friend.
Someone you haven't spoken to in 6 months because of a bitter, explosive argument.
Right. Holding out an olive branch would be doing the terrifying work of finally picking up your phone, typing out a message, and inviting them to a neutral coffee shop or a birthday dinner.
It is an invitation to transition from hostility back to dialogue.
And we really have to acknowledge the immense vulnerability required to do this.
Huge vulnerability. When you hold out that branch, you are extending your arm. You are completely exposed.
The other person has the full power to slap it away. Right. To ignore the text message or to reject the invitation.
Exactly.
But I had this thought. Why not hand your enemy a flower? Or an apple?
A flower is pretty, sure.
Right, and an apple is sweet. But when you factor in that agricultural timeline we just talked about, the olive branch takes on a massive proxy value.
Because of its brutally long growth cycle, it is literally a stand-in for long-term stability.
Yes. By handing someone an olive branch, you are effectively telling them, I am offering you a promise of a future without war.
I want to plant something with you today that will take years to grow because I plan on being at peace with you for the rest of our lives.
You are offering them the future fruits of peace.
But of course, simply extending that invitation to talk and having them accept the coffee date doesn't mean you have actually solved the problem.
Getting them into the same room is just the prerequisite.
Right. Sitting across from them at the coffee shop doesn't mean the anger is magically gone.
If you just sit there glaring at each other, rigidly demanding the other person apologize for everything, the peace fails immediately.
The physical and emotional space between you has to be closed.
So how do we actually navigate that gap? We have to rely on the geometry of compromise. You have to meet halfway.
Here, the language shifts from agricultural timelines to a profound spatial logic.
Okay, let's unpack that spatial logic.
Imagine a very specific physical scenario. You and the person you are arguing with are standing on opposite ends of a very long, very high bridge spanning a deep gorge.
Okay, so I am standing on the north end, furious.
Yeah.
You are on the south end, equally furious.
Exactly. Now, if you refuse to take a single step forward, if you remain completely, stubbornly rigid in your demands and your viewpoint, then you are forcing me to do all the work.
If I want the relationship to survive, I am forced to walk the entire length of the bridge just to reach you.
Right. You just stand there, arms crossed, totally secure on your side of the gorge.
While you do all the physical, emotional labor of walking toward me, leaving your safety zone behind.
And in the context of an argument, if one person does all the walking, that represents an unfair surrender.
It's a complete failure of diplomacy.
You haven't negotiated a peace. You have simply forced the other party to capitulate entirely to your worldview.
Because the person who walked the whole bridge feels defeated, resentful, and utterly stripped of their dignity.
And that kind of peace never lasts because it is built on submission, not agreement.
But the idiom isn't meet somewhere on the bridge. It isn't, I'll take 3 steps and you take 40.
No, it is precisely meet halfway.
The exactness of that phrase is everything. It implies a strictly mutual sacrifice.
If we both agree to walk exactly 50% of the distance, we meet perfectly in the center.
We both have to feel the effort of the walk. We both have to leave our secure, defensive starting positions.
Both sides have to give up some of their initial demands to reach a mutual, fair agreement.
The sources gave a really good example of this. Consider a high-stakes labor negotiation.
Right, where you have a workers' union demanding a 10% wage increase.
And on the other side of the table, the corporate management counters with a paltry 2% offer.
If management refuses to move a single inch, and the union is eventually forced to accept the 2% just to keep their jobs, the union has walked the entire bridge.
They have surrendered.
But if they sit at the table, negotiate in good faith, and eventually they meet halfway and agree on a 6% raise, both sides have compromised.
The union didn't get their 10. The management had to pay more than their 2.
They both gave up a portion of their ideal outcome to secure the ongoing stability of the company.
The mathematical precision of halfway is brilliant because human dignity is incredibly fragile during a conflict.
So fragile. In a bitter argument, nobody wants to look like the loser.
Right. Nobody wants to feel like they were the one who caved.
By meeting exactly halfway, the geometry of the compromise ensures that both parties maintain their pride.
You gave up exactly as much as I did. We are equals in the center of the bridge.
Neither of us won everything, but neither of us lost our self-respect.
That shared sacrifice is the core engine of true compromise.
It really is. However, agreeing on the terms, standing together in the middle of the bridge and shaking hands, is really only the intellectual part of the resolution.
You have verbally agreed to stop the act of hostility. The bleeding has stopped.
But now the heavy physical labor of rebuilding the trust must actually begin.
Because you can't just live in the middle of a bridge forever. You have to go back to your lives.
Exactly. Which takes us from the architecture of the bridge back down into the dirt, the wood, and the grit of agriculture.
Right. To truly heal the relationship, you have to mend fences.
This idiom plunges us deep into the grueling world of traditional farming, ranching, and land management.
The concept of the boundary is fundamental to human civilization.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that deeply ingrained proverb that states, good fences make good neighbors.
Because if you have two farmers living next to each other, the fence is the physical manifestation of their mutual respect.
It's the boundary that keeps everything in order. It dictates where my responsibility ends and yours begins.
And as long as the fence is strong, we can live side by side in total peace.
But when that wooden fence rots or breaks or is intentionally torn down, absolute chaos follows.
A broken boundary is the anatomy of chaos in an agricultural setting.
If the fence fails, the cattle from Farm A wander into Farm B.
They trample the delicate crops. The herds mix together, making it impossible to tell which animal belongs to who.
The dogs start fighting.
The farmers immediately start screaming at each other over the destroyed harvest, who was responsible for the broken wood, and why the boundary wasn't maintained.
Conflict is the immediate, inevitable result of a breached boundary.
So how did they fix it?
Right. To stop the chaos, the two angry farmers cannot just stand on their porches and yell apologies across the field.
They cannot just sign a piece of paper in a lawyer's office saying, "We legally agree the cows shouldn't mix."
Because a verbal agreement doesn't keep a 1,000-pound cow out of a cornfield.
No, it doesn't. The idiom requires physical action.
They have to go to the shed. They have to grab their heavy hammers, buckets of nails, and fresh planks of wood.
They have to walk out to the property line, stand physically right next to each other in the mud, and actively manually repair the broken fence.
They have to engage in the shared labor of repair.
And when we translate this deeply physical act into modern sociology, workplace dynamics, or politics, the wooden fence becomes metaphorical trust.
So mending fences means actively, collaboratively working to repair a damaged relationship through shared effort.
Exactly. Think about a brutal, deeply polarized political election.
Oh, man. The campaign is ugly. Both sides spend months tearing each other apart in the press, attacking each other's character, and destroying trust.
But once the election is finally over, a savvy, newly elected leader won't just gloat.
They might spend their entire first week in office aggressively mending fences with the opposition party.
Right. And what does that look like in practice?
It means the new leader walks into the offices of their rivals. They sit down for steady, unglamorous dialogue.
They compromise on minor pieces of legislation. They intentionally show up to each other's events.
They do the mundane work of governance together.
And that is a crucial distinction. Mending fences forces you to work side by side with the person you were literally just at war with.
Think about the psychology of working shoulder to shoulder with someone.
Yeah, when you are hammering a nail or working on a joint project, you aren't staring them down in a confrontational eye-to-eye stance.
You are both looking at the problem in front of you. It diffuses the tension.
It tells us that true reconciliation isn't just a passive state of not yelling at each other anymore.
No, it is a collaborative, sweaty, intentional project to rebuild the boundaries and the trust that keep the peace, and to swing the hammer together.
Because that shared labor, that mutual investment in the repair, is what slowly begins to dissipate the lingering resentment.
You are building something tangible together rather than focusing on how you tore each other apart yesterday.
All right, so you put in the work, the fences are fixed.
The cattle are separated, the boundaries are clear.
The intellectual bridge has been crossed.
But human beings are volatile,
Extremely.
How do you ensure the battle doesn't just spontaneously ignite all over again the very next day when someone gets in a bad mood?
You need a definitive ritual.
You need a way to look at the universe and say, this is absolutely unequivocally over. You need an ultimate act of diplomatic closure.
Right. To formalize a lasting peace, the warring parties must look each other in the eye and perform a highly specific ritual. They must bury the hatchet.
This one is legendary, and its historical roots are incredibly profound. This comes directly from Native American diplomacy.
It is one of the most powerful diplomatic metaphors we have.
Tell us about the history there.
Historically, when warring Native American tribes, such as the nations within the Iroquois Confederacy, finally negotiated a lasting peace treaty, the chiefs would engage in a highly symbolic, yet deeply practical, physical ritual.
They wouldn't just declare peace verbally.
No, they would literally dig a hole deep into the earth and bury their weapons, their tomahawks, their battle hatchets, their clubs, under the roots of a tree or deep in the dirt.
Wait, hold on. Burying the hatchet sounds incredibly poetic, but practically.
Yeah.
If I am a warrior and I want to disarm to prove I'm peaceful, why wouldn't I just throw the hatchet into a rushing river so it's gone forever? Or just lock all the weapons in a chest?
That's a great question.
Why go through the exhausting, dirty labor of digging a hole in the earth?
Because the physics of this disarmament are brilliant. Throwing a weapon in a river destroys it entirely, which leaves you defenseless against outside threats.
Ah, I see.
And locking it in a chest keeps it too easily accessible. By burying their weapons in the ground, they achieve something entirely different.
It makes it physically impossible to suddenly impulsively strike each other in a moment of heated anger.
Exactly. The war is officially, visibly, and practically over, but the weapons still exist if an external enemy attacks.
It's about friction. I realized this when thinking about the physical act of digging.
The friction is the whole point.
Burying requires manual labor. You have to dig the hole, place the weapon, shovel the dirt back in, and pack it down.
Right.
If a week later you get furious over a minor disagreement and want to start the war all over again, you can't just grab a weapon off a table and swing it.
No, you have to walk out to the site, get a shovel, and actively, furiously dig through 3 feet of packed mud to get your hatchet back.
Exactly.
It creates a deliberate, time-consuming barrier to impulsive violence.
While you are sweating and digging through the dirt to unearth your weapon, your elevated heart rate has time to slow down.
Your prefrontal cortex has time to re-engage.
You have 20 minutes of physical labor to ask yourself, is this minor disagreement really worth restarting a bloody war over?
It builds a mandatory cooling-off period into the treaty.
We see this translated into modern corporate warfare all the time.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine 2 massive rival software companies.
They've spent a decade viciously suing each other, trying to destroy each other's market share, poaching employees, and burning millions in legal fees.
And finally, the board of directors realizes this endless war is bankrupting them both.
So they agree to bury the hatchet, they drop the lawsuits, they dissolve the hostile PR campaigns, and they merge into one corporation.
They don't destroy their legal departments, they just bury the weapons they were using against each other.
That is the profound psychological wisdom embedded in the ritual. It builds friction into the act of restarting a conflict.
But, as we all know from our own lives, burying the hatchet only stops the active, mutual war.
Because human memory is incredibly stubborn.
Trauma doesn't vanish overnight. Even after the treaty is signed, even after the hatchet is buried and the fence is mended, minor insult or passive-aggressive comments might still flare up.
Someone's going to step on your toes eventually. It is inevitable.
It is. And navigating those post-war flare-ups requires an entirely different, incredibly difficult kind of skill.
A true master of emotional intelligence knows that to maintain the peace you just worked so hard to build, sometimes you must consciously choose to turn the other cheek.
This comes from a famous biblical injunction, and it demands an almost superhuman level of emotional restraint.
Let's talk about the biological reality of human instinct here.
Sure.
If an enemy walks up to you and physically slaps you on the right cheek, you are evolutionarily wired to punch them right back.
In a fraction of a second, your amygdala hijacks your brain.
The adrenaline spikes, the fight or flight response kicks into overdrive, and every single fiber of your nervous system screams at you to retaliate, to defend yourself, to destroy the threat.
The baseline human instinct is the perfect reciprocity of violence. You hurt me, I hurt you back.
But the metaphor asks for a conscious, supreme cognitive override of your biology.
It asks you to perform the highly vulnerable physical act of consciously turning your head to offer the left cheek.
Which is terrifying. You are exposing the most vulnerable part of your neck and face to someone who just assaulted you.
It is terrifying. But by doing this, you are explicitly refusing to participate in their framework of violence.
You are acting as a circuit breaker in the machinery of conflict.
Because the cycle of retaliation requires two participants. If one person refuses to strike back, the cycle breaks.
Idiomatically, taking the moral high ground by turning the other cheek means peacefully ignoring an insult, an injury, or a provocation without seeking revenge.
Let's use an example from the workplace. Imagine a guy named David.
Okay, David is giving a massive, high-stakes presentation at work in front of all the senior executives.
Right. And during the Q&A, a jealous colleague makes a highly sarcastic, deeply biting personal comment meant to humiliate David in front of the bosses.
The colleague just metaphorically slapped David across the face.
Instinct dictates that David should snap back, hurl an insult at the colleague, and fiercely defend his ego.
But if David snaps back, the presentation devolves into a petty shouting match.
The colleague successfully dragged David down into the mud.
Instead, David chooses to turn the other cheek. He takes a breath, completely ignores the sarcasm as if he didn't even hear it, and pivots smoothly back to the professional data of his presentation.
Which is a power move.
Now, I have to ask this because I know people listening are thinking the exact same thing.
Go ahead.
Doesn't turning the other cheek just make you a target? Doesn't it just make you a punching bag?
A lot of people think that, yeah.
If you let people insult you without consequence, doesn't it signal to every Billy in the office that they can slap you around and you won't do a thing about it?
It is the most common critique of this philosophy, but it fundamentally misunderstands the power dynamic at play.
Okay, break that down for us.
Turning the other cheek is not about submission. It is the absolute opposite of weakness.
Interesting.
It is a display of total mastery over your own emotions and, by extension, mastery over the situation.
Taking the moral high ground isn't passive. It is an active, incredibly powerful choice to not let someone else dictate your behavior.
Exactly. When David ignores the sarcastic comment, he isn't surrendering.
He is silently showing the entire room of executives that the colleague's petty insult have absolutely zero power over him.
The colleague looks small, desperate, and unprofessional, while David looks unshakable.
By turning his head, David dictates the terms of the engagement.
He maintains the peace and accelerates the healing process, rather than allowing the conflict to reignite.
You are looking at the hatchet they just dug up and tried to hand to you, and you are simply refusing to take it.
You are deciding with complete autonomy that the conflict ends with you.
And by repeatedly turning the other cheek to those minor infractions, you eventually accelerate the timeline of healing to the point where the past truly no longer bothers you.
The sting of the slap fades.
Which brings us to the final, ultimate phase of forgiveness. This phase is defined by the absolute unstoppable flow of time.
This is where we reach the pinnacle of peace in a relationship.
This state of grace happens when the past arguments finally become water under the bridge, and you make the conscious final decision to let bygones be bygones.
These are arguably the most serene, beautiful concepts in the entire architecture of forgiveness.
We have moved from the bloody dirt of the medieval hunt and the sweat of mending fences to a place of total tranquility.
Let's start with the hydrological metaphor of water under the bridge. Picture this in your mind.
Imagine a massive, ancient stone bridge spanning a wide, deep river.
The river is flowing powerfully beneath it, and the fundamental physics of a river dictate that it only flows in one direction, pulled endlessly by gravity.
Now imagine a single gallon of water in that river. It rushes downstream towards the bridge, it passes seamlessly beneath the stone arches, and it continues on its journey.
Once that specific gallon of water passes beneath the bridge, it is gone.
It is heading out to the ocean. You cannot run along the bank and chase it down, and you absolutely cannot force it to flow back upstream.
It is a physical impossibility.
Applying this to human relationships provides a profound framework for dealing with past trauma, mistakes, or arguments that we obsess over.
Right. Let's say a close friend deeply betrayed your trust 5 years ago.
Or maybe you had a massive relationship-altering screaming match a decade ago over a business deal.
Calling that event water under the bridge means accepting the brutal, beautiful reality of time.
It is an exercise in radical acceptance.
Exactly. Say you borrowed your friend's incredibly expensive camera 5 years ago and accidentally dropped it in a lake.
Oh no. It was a huge fight. It took months to mend the fences.
But today, your friend brings it up again and starts profusely apologizing for how angry they got back then.
You look at them and say, please stop worrying about it. It is water under the bridge.
The camera is broken, the fight happened, you yelled at each other, but it is entirely irreversibly in the past.
The event cannot be changed, just like the water cannot be forced to flow backward through the arches of the bridge.
It is a mutual acknowledgement that the historical event, while real, is simply no longer worth agonizing over.
Its energy has dissipated into the ocean of the past.
And this pairs flawlessly with the phrase, let bygones be bygones, which introduces a wonderfully archaic concept of a totally clean slate.
I actually found the etymology of this fascinating in the source material.
Yeah.
The word bygone is an archaic 16th century noun. It literally just means something that is gone by.
An event that has passed.
So when you say let bygones be bygones, you are technically stating a tautology.
You are saying, let the things that have passed remain past.
But idiomatically, it operates as the ultimate verbal peace treaty between two people.
It means you are making a mutual, highly conscious decision to completely refuse to hold a grudge.
Imagine looking at a bitter, vicious business dispute you had with a rival when you were both in your 20s.
You spent years trying to outmaneuver each other.
Now, you are both in your 60s, entering retirement. You run into each other at a mutual friend's dinner party.
You have a choice. You can reignite a 40-year-old war, or you can look at each other, laugh at how foolish you were, and wipe the slate completely clean.
You let the bygones be bygones, and you enjoy the dinner party as equals.
To summarize this entire philosophy with an analogy, we, the human beings in the relationship, are the stone bridge.
And the conflict, the anger, the broken cameras, the screaming matches, the business disputes, that is the water.
Right. And the water doesn't destroy the bridge.
It might rage during a storm, the river might rise dangerously high, and it might batter against the stone pillars. But ultimately, the water just passes beneath it.
It flows away, leaving the bridge standing strong, permanent, and weathered, but intact.
The relationship survives the flood.
The bridge remains standing only because the people involved chose to maintain it. They chose to build it strong enough to withstand the currents.
So let's just step back and look at the sheer majesty of the journey we just charted. This isn't just a list of quirky sayings.
No, it's a process.
We started with the agonizing, nauseating humility of eating humble pie, forcing ourselves to swallow our pride and admit fault.
We walked out of our defensive bunkers to engage in the precise, mathematically balanced, shared sacrifice of meeting halfway on the bridge.
We picked up our tools and swung heavy hammers side by side in the mud to mend the fences.
We did the exhausting physical labor of digging through the dirt to bury the hatchet so we couldn't strike each other impulsively.
We found the supreme cognitive strength to turn the other cheek when the ghost of the conflict flared up.
And finally, after all of that labor, we reached the absolute serenity of watching the anger flow away as water under the bridge.
Letting the bygones fade into history.
Going through this progression highlights a vital truth. These idioms are not just vocabulary words you memorize for a linguistics test.
They represent a deeply ingrained, historically tested emotional intelligence toolkit.
When you utilize the concepts behind these phrases, and more importantly, when you actually enact the incredibly difficult behaviors they describe, you are demonstrating a profound, rare level of human maturity.
And to you listening right now, this is a direct invitation to audit your own diplomatic skills.
We all have moments of intense conflict. We all cause wreckage.
Think about your own life, your own relationships, your own grudges. When was the last time you genuinely, without caveat or excuse, ate humble pie and admitted to your partner that you were entirely wrong?
Or have you ever taken a deep breath, embraced the terrifying vulnerability of rejection, and held out an olive branch to an old friend you had completely lost touch with over a stupid argument?
How you answer those questions and how willing you are to engage in those behaviors will entirely dictate the strength and longevity of your relationships.
That's the real takeaway here.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
Let's hear it.
Look closely at the entire architecture we just built. Notice how almost every single one of these ancient idioms for peacemaking demands intense physical action.
Yeah, you are eating internal organs. You are carrying and holding out heavy branches.
You are physically walking across vast bridges. You are hauling wood, swinging hammers, and wrangling cattle to mend a boundary.
You are digging deep holes in the hard dirt, and you are physically turning your head to take a hit.
They are all highly labor-intensive, sweaty, tactile metaphors. Peacemaking in the ancient world was back-breaking work.
It wasn't passive.
But think about how we operate in today's world. When we get into a vicious fight, when we cause wreckage, how do we usually try to resolve it?
We try to shortcut the discomfort.
We send a quick, heavily edited text message. We fire off a passive-aggressive email. We leave a voicemail.
We drop a little thumbs-up emoji on a post and hope the anger just magically disappears.
So my question to you is this. Do these ancient phrases teach us that true forgiveness and peacemaking are inherently physical, labor-intensive processes that simply cannot be shortcut by modern digital technology?
That's a great question.
Maybe the reason we feel so perpetually exhausted by modern conflict, and the reason our relationships feel so fragile today, is that we aren't willing to do the heavy lifting required to truly fix them.
We are trying to text our way out of a broken fence.
We are trying to email a buried hatchet. But maybe, just maybe, if you want the peace to actually last, you have to get off your phone, walk out into the mud, and pick up the hammer.
You actually have to build the bridge.
Keep that in mind the next time the adrenaline fades, and you are left looking around at the wreckage. You cannot just wish the damage away.